super grateful to have you here. My name is Joseph Pearson, and I'm honored to serve as the professional development specialist here at Moreland University, where our mission is teaching teachers around the world to be resourceful problem solvers and tech-savvy educators through an online collaborative activity-based learning system designed for tomorrow's students in a dynamic and diverse world. We are able to live into that mission with our flagship teacher certification program, one that prepares teachers around the world to teach any subject area or grade level from pre-K to 12 by learning best practice, by engaging with a cohort of educators who are equally dedicated and determined to learn and grow, and also by earning a US teaching license from anywhere in the world without having to come to the United States. We do start cohorts every single month, and that program lasts 9 months. We have the value as an institution that it be accessible and that it be affordable, that it be collaborative, and that it engage in one of the most important aspects of teacher training, which is a student teaching experience. If you're interested in learning more information about the teacher certification program, be sure to put your information in the chat space and we will follow up. In addition, we encourage educators in our community to advance in their careers and to grow by continuing to learn and to expand their toolkit of pedagogical skills. So our master's degrees in education have a curriculum that is built on research-proven instructional methods coupled with innovation and with educational technology and with inclusive practices that bring together practice and theory. In addition to having standalone master's degrees in leadership and globalization and research, 2 programs that you can do completely separate from the Teach Now program, we also encourage those who are in our Teach Now program to enroll in an add-on master's degree in one of the specialization areas listed on your screen, including early childhood education, special education, teaching multilingual learners, educational technology, globalization and education for our international teachers, as well as educational research. And finally, in my role, I have the honor of working with school districts in the United States, as well as international schools around the world, to deliver professional development that meets the specific needs and goals of the institutions with which we partner. We create programs that enable teachers throughout their careers to engage with the most up-to-date research and best practice as they grow to be able to serve their students in their particular contexts. And we always bring our activity-based collaborative model. So today we're going to start by having each of the panelists introduce themselves. We're gonna then dive into a discussion where we will really introduce DEIB, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, as a concept, and make sure we have a shared understanding before we talk about global perspectives on this in education, and finally dive into practical applications and takeaways. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and invite our panelists to please introduce themselves. I would love to start with Dr. Sean Armstrong. Sean, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. So hello, everyone. So my name is, you can call me Dr. Sean, or Sean is fine. So I am an educator in a bilingual school in China, and I have lived in China for the past 9 years. Prior to that, I taught ESL for adults at community colleges and state universities.
What part of the United States, or I assume you said you were in community colleges, so where in the United States were you teaching before?
Oh, so I taught in Pennsylvania, and I also taught in Washington State.
Wonderful. Well, welcome, and thank you so much for coming. Melissa.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Melissa, and I am located in West Virginia, in a little area called Milton, right outside of Huntington. but I have taught special education for a number of years in the public schools here in West Virginia, and I have been with Moreland for 5 years. So I'm very happy to be here.
And Melissa, we have had you in a previous webinar, and I get to work with you in a number of other projects we have supporting school districts in the United States. So Melissa, thank you for being here and for being part of our journey today. Well, I would like to introduce myself because I'm actually a panelist too. Usually I will just be a moderator, but this is so important to me that I wanted to make sure that I was able to contribute and to talk with you all. As I said, my name is Joseph Pearson, but I do go by Joey. I've been with Moreland University for over 5 years, and I'm currently honored to serve as our professional development specialist. My background is in multilingual education, having taught Spanish and ESL in Washington, D.C. and in California, as well as worked in training diplomats and teachers throughout my career in best practices around language acquisition, and then with Moreland University, simply with best practice overall. I'm currently studying my doctorate in educational leadership at the University of California, Los Angeles, while I continue to do the good work that we're doing here at Moreland University. So in today's webinar, we're going to be able to have a chance to really think about what DEIB means, or what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean in education. And I want to give us a chance to start by having that sort of overarching discussion about what that concept means for us in the different places where we are in the world. But before we do that, let me make sure that we all know what the important takeaways from our conversation are today. We're going to not only provide that comprehensive overview, but we're also going to connect to the global context of diversity, equity, and inclusion in education, and provide all of our participants today with some actionable items that they can take with them as they bring diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging to their schools, into their classrooms. So without further ado, I'd love to jump directly into our questions. I'm going to pull up the questions right now and put them in the chat space so that we have access for everyone in the webinar to be able to see the questions as well as our panelists. So in the chat space, you'll find our first question. It says, what does diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging mean to you, and how have you integrated this and the principles of DEIB in your educational context, including your work with teacher candidates at Moreland University? I would love to ask Melissa to start us off. And then Sean, Melissa, let's engage in a dialogue and be able to talk back and forth about our experiences, bringing it all together for a robust and engaging conversation. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds good to
Sounds
me.
good.
All right, Melissa, take it away.
All right. So diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging means a lot to me. Being a minority, female here. But I've always felt like, everyone, deserves, a chance, an opportunity, a seat at the table. And I go about this, every day in my practice, in having candidates know that they have it's open communication. They can share anything with me. And that was the same with my classroom too. I mean, it was always like an open, anything that anybody needed to share, anything that anybody needed, they could come to me and, we would make it work. Um, and, just continuing to educate myself, there's always something new I can learn about, someone else, other cultures, other people. And it's just so important to me that everyone feels safe, they feel welcome, they feel like they belong. I think, that's something that it's important for me to model to my teacher candidates, and they can model that to their students. Um, you know, being a student who, went through and there were teachers who didn't quite understand me, and they, they hadn't seen very many students like me. it's always important to me to really kind of model how we should, interact with diverse students. It's just something that's always really, really been on my mind since I was a student. So yeah.
And you base a lot of your experience bringing DEIB from not only your classroom instructional experience, but also from your positionality as a woman of color in the United States. And I think it's important that we set the landscape, that we have a really diverse group of folks. If I look back and saw where people are coming from, it's all over the world. And so maybe Melissa, you could talk to us a little bit about what it means for you being a woman of color, a woman who is African American in the United States, and how that has impacted your journey as an educator, and in particular, your interest and pursuit of principles of DEIB.
Absolutely. Yes. And so growing up, I was always taught, you are going to have to work 10 times harder than the average person. And I always heard that, and I was like, okay. And then I as I got older, I really saw it, just in in particular. I remember one experience where I grew up in California for, you know, most of my childhood. We moved to West Virginia when I was 12. Out there, I was attending a school that had like a college prep program. That's the type of, curriculum I was used to. Um, I started attending public school in West Virginia and specifically attended a pre-algebra class in 7th grade. Um, the teacher knew nothing about me, and she told my mom that I didn't belong there. And yeah, and e- I actually, really didn't know about this until later on, but I could tell by the way I was treated that she just didn't think that I was capable of, keeping up with the work. And that stuck with me, gosh, this was back in the mid 90s, and it stuck with me, just seeing that, seeing my sister and how she was treated, um, when a guidance counselor tried to prevent her from going out of state to school, and told my mom that she wouldn't be able to be successful. And so just those experiences, many other microaggressions that I've, experienced in the classroom as a student, um, it stuck with me, and I just I didn't want that for other students of color or any, you know, diverse group of students, anybody who, is diverse in any way. Um, and so I ended up coming to education kind of, I started out in music therapy. So I ended up coming to education, and it was just something that really, it was important to me to I'm going to show people, share my experience with people, educate people, and that way when they encounter different students, they know what to do, and the students don't have to experience what I experienced growing up. They don't have to feel like they don't belong, that they have to work hard, that they have to prove themselves. You know, it's a lot of stress that it puts on a student, and I just didn't want that for other students. And so and it's really been like, a big part of what I do here at Moreland is, really kind of sharing, my experience. Let's talk about, diversity. Let's talk about how we can include students. Let's talk about how we can differentiate. It's a big part of, what I do. um, and I feel like it makes a difference. It's eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people.
Sean, what are your thoughts, and how do you relate to and or define DEIB for you and your perspective as an educator?
Okay, well, it's been really so through my work with Moreland, I've been instructing with Moreland for about a year and a half or so. And so prior to that, I had completed advanced degrees, but and through that, I studied English, teaching English as a second or foreign language, and I also studied composition. And through my composition studies, I learned about bell hooks and other especially African American dialect and things like this. And so it was really, and in Washington State where I was, it wasn't it wasn't as big of a deal. But when I went to Pennsylvania for advanced studies, and in my own classes, I had African-American students, and I learned I had to deal with them in a different way. That's the easiest. I had some interesting experiences with that. And then coming to China, it's really been an eye-opener. And I would not, as a white person in China, I could not say that I would well, I am a member of a minority here. Not that I'm, and I don't want to say that it's a negative thing, but it is different being the subject of othering. This is the first time in my life that, because I'm being a white male, middle-class male, in America, I didn't see as many problems. I mean, I've been exposed to them and things, but coming to China and suddenly I am definitely an other. I am definitely put in a category. I have a label. I'm either one of two things. I'm either a Laowai or a Waigoren, which is both mean foreigner. And depending on how it's said, it can either be a positive thing or a very negative thing. So I feel, and even as an instructor at my school, I don't carry that same amount of authority that a teacher should, because I am not Chinese. And so it's not so when I think of diversity, so when I think of DEIB, I realize the mistakes that I might have made while I was in America. That now that I'm able to see it from another perspective and go, okay, not that I would be able to say, oh, I know exactly what you're going through if I talk to a minority, like that would not be fair, but I can say, I can understand what othering feels like. And it's
Can you
not
define that for us? Because that's a
othering.
very interesting term. I'm going to put it in the chat space for those of us who may have never heard that term, but othering is an important vocabulary word in this conversation that I think is, it really encapsulates the experience of people, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And it helps us to have this conversation in more of a global perspective. So Sean, what does othering mean?
Sure, othering means you are not part of the majority. Somehow you are different. Whether it could be the language you speak, it could be your dress, it could be your religious beliefs, it could be any number of things. And in China, it's basically, they look at me and they say, oh, you're not, and as I would have to say, othering, it's probably more, I mean, in the United States, we have more of inclusivity, let me back that up a little bit. So the United States is more of an individualistic society. We think, me, I have my individual rights. The Constitution guarantees me X, Y, Z. In other countries, such as in Sweden and especially China, where it's more of a group mentality, it's that we are we. So, I mean, even though in China there are 54 minority groups, if you didn't know that, you couldn't, I mean, as an outsider, I would say you're all Chinese, but they see differences. So this othering is kind of like, okay, you are different. It's where people live in the majority say, you are different from me, and I have to do something more to understand you, or you have to step up and do something more to be a part of the group.
Right. I appreciate that explanation. And it's not the conversation, folks, that you would be having in a teacher preparation program that was entirely US centric, right? We are an incredibly large, diverse community of educators from around the world, and we employ a collaborative online learning platform that creates experiences here at Moreland University that are interactive and inclusive, such that we can empower those candidates who come from diverse backgrounds and geographical locations. Because at Moreland University, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, it's not just an idea, it's a lived reality. And so I hoped that we could talk about a couple of examples of some of the community members, some of the candidates who we've served, and I'm ready to go. So I'm gonna share about one of my dear friends, my virtual friends, who is a graduate of Moreland University's master's degree in education with a focus on educational technology. Her name is Nicole. And Nicole is a prime example of how DEIB principles can be integrated into non-traditional educational settings. Nicole founded the LGBTQ Homeschool Association, addressing a very specific area of need that she identified in homeschooling spaces. She's providing resources and building a supportive community for families and educators of LGBTQIA plus students, and is building off of what she's learned from Moreland University pedagogically, but also technologically, to create this space in a virtual environment. She's also offering courses and workshops to support students and families in promoting more inclusive and more supportive learning experiences for homeschool students who are part of the LGBTQ community. So Nicole is able to demonstrate through her story how the mission of Moreland University enables our community members to dive into a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as a transformative force in education. Nicole has not only been able to excel in her career because of her work, earning the certificate of completion for the Teach Now program and the master's degree, but also she's been able to serve as a change agent in her community in a really interconnected world. So that's Nicole's story. And I wonder if Melissa or Sean, do you have a candidate in mind about whom you might be able to share?
Yeah, I can't think of I mean, I have candidates who have a lot of positive experiences through the program, but nothing like your experience with Nicole, though.
Yeah.
We're
1 in a million. Yes.
Oh, so much.
And I will actually put information about her foundation here in the chat space, because we were able to spotlight her good work in a previous webinar so that everyone can see that. Melissa, would you like to share anything?
I was just gonna say, I don't think I have. I mean, I've had many different candidates who have done amazing things in their classrooms and in their schools and their communities. But yeah, I'm not. There's just been so many that I can't really think of one. So.
Well, in addition, I've worked with candidates who have begun their careers working in urban environments in Washington, D.C., and then transitioned to rural environments in the mountains of Guatemala. And one of the things that they've learned in their classrooms is that it's important to be culturally responsive to, as Sean mentioned, understand the perspectives that they bring within their different cultural backgrounds as educators into the context of the learning community where they're serving. So I think it's really important that we bring in the pedagogical perspective of responding to our students' cultures, to their families, to their linguistic diversity, and in so doing, create an environment where the diversity of our classroom is celebrated, not just accommodated, right? So I'd like to put in another question for us. And I appreciate everyone in the chat space. I see we have folks from New Zealand and Ghana and Kenya. We have folks in China, all over the place. How do approaches to DEIB vary in schools around the world? And what else can we learn from the diverse experiences of teachers and students globally? Please include experiences from any of the candidates you've worked with in your learning cohorts. Melissa, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Yeah. And actually, maybe Sean can kind of speak to this, because this has been like my main, experiences. I've learned a lot about our candidates who work, China and, Japan, and just different, areas in Asia. And it's just interesting to kind of hear how things are done there. It seems like I think they're starting to move more towards, like, really, I think, embracing diversity. But the biggest thing that I have noticed is, as a special educator, the difference in special education and how it's handled in countries, across the world. Here, we have a very inclusion is a big thing for special education. We want to include our students as much as possible. We want to identify them. It's not something that's taboo. It's something that, it's encouraged for people to, yes, let's identify, let's get students on an IEP, an individualized education program. Let's get them served. But I know my candidates in other countries have said, oh, it's something that's not really talked about. It's something that we don't really handle, because there's just cultural differences, in that it's still kind of taboo. People feel that if there is a diagnosis or need for an IEP, that they just don't feel comfortable with that. And that's the biggest thing I've noticed. And so I talk a lot about that, about how, okay, well, yes, you may see a student in your class who is exhibiting, signs of what could be this, but the parents are not, and the school doesn't really have the resources. So let's talk about what we can do in the classroom to support that student without having, the formal things that we would need, in the US, like the IEP and
Formal systems and processes and procedures that are aligned with the Individuals with Disabilities and Education Act, that really is the foundation of the way we do special education here, right?
Right. And I talk a lot about that, and I share a lot about it, because even though it's not something that is, used in other countries, there's a lot that can be learned from it. And even though there may not be an IEP in another country, you still can, use principles from, IDEA, IEPs, the least restrictive environment. So yes, we do a lot about that. And that's the one thing that really sticks out to me, is how different that is.
Yeah, I can address some of those, at least for China. So China is changing. It's like a barge, so it's moving in a slow way. But from my experience, so where right next door to our school is a special education school. And occasionally we have festivals and things, and we invite the students from that school to come participate with us, which is really fun. We do like Halloween parties and things like that. Also at the school, they teach, they have a small store where the students learn how to count change and things like that. And they also have a bakery where they provide baked goods for our school, which is very unusual for China. Especially, it's nice because the students, as our students are walking up to school, those students are also walking by, and we're saying hello. And it's a really warm thing, because as I've lived in other places in China, they still have special education schools, but they're behind tall walls. And you don't see those students. But I do know, from reading articles and research that I've done, that Chinese parents of SPED students are seeing the examples in the United States, and they're trying to bring inclusion is part of Chinese law. It's just the application is not as equitable. So I know for a fact that I have had students with special needs in my classroom, and it's just been very, from the system here I can only speak about this school, but usually the teachers said, "We'll try your best," but we don't, the parent is just happy that the child is in our classroom. So do what you can, but don't expect much, which kind of breaks my heart, because I know if we could apply more of the American system and, more maybe, like pull out programs, or give that student one-on-one attention, maybe there would be more growth. But unfortunately, China is more of a, got to do this, move, 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 move. And if you can't keep, in fact, we're taught, teach to the middle. The high students will take care of themselves. The low students will do, we'll move them on, which is really, that really breaks my heart. Because I know if we could take if we could have special programs or if we could apply, pull out programs or other kinds of things, that all students could be successful. But it's just.
Sorry, Sean. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, okay. I was just saying, now, of course, success has different meanings.
Right.
And I'm coming to learn that as a, if a student makes a little bit of progress, that could be amazing. And we just applaud that. Like, we are so proud of you. That's so great. But unfortunately in China, there's more of a, there's a competition among the students. It's like, who's going to be the best. And once that class has decided who the best is, the rest of the students kind of sit back and say, he's going to answer all the questions. So what I have to do as a teacher is I have to make sure that I give everyone a chance to answer questions. I make sure that I validate all of their answers. Even if it's wrong, to say, give that special praise, saying, hey, that was, I can see where you're coming from, and that answer does make a lot of sense. Really trying not to, right now I'm just trying to, it's the beginning of the school year. I've only been with these students for 3 weeks. So I'm still trying to draw everyone out and make everyone feel comfortable with me, because I, as the foreign teacher, as the international teacher, they know they can't speak in Chinese, or they assume that they can't speak in Chinese with me. And that just, so they feel like, oh, I can't talk to him at all. I can't, because he's not going to understand me anyway. And actually, I have a lot of years working with people who don't speak English. So I can I'm a pretty good guesser, or at least I can say, do you mean this? And so I try that a lot. And I have other students, fortunately, some students are coming out of they're coming out, they're saying, oh yeah, okay. And they speak their broken English and they're very comfortable. And I don't try to overly correct them. It's like, just feel comfortable talking to me. And more students are coming up to my desk. So it's really, so I think that it's not really inclusion, but when we think of inclusion as working, inclusion has it can be broad or narrow. And so I'm thinking of inclusion as the broad thing, like, hey, include me as the other, include me in your world. Let me know what you're doing. Like, I want to know about you kids, so when I know more about you, I can help you to be a better student. So that's been my experience so far.
Well, I've had the opportunity to work with candidates in South America, in Suriname and Guyana. And in those two countries, in the northernmost part of South America, there are very interesting relational dynamics between the diverse ethnic groups in the region. There are folks who come from Asia who have been a part of the history of the formation of Guyana and Suriname for many decades. There are people from the Caribbean who have come over and have been part of that community for a long time. There are people who are indigenous and who come from indigenous communities, native communities to South America. And the intersection of all of those communities has been one of the most interesting things that I've experienced through the eyes of the teachers I serve, because the ways in which students interact with one another are marked and changed based on the families that they come from and the cultural heritages that they bring to the classroom. And there may be conflict sometimes, to be very honest with you. I've heard through the experiences of the teachers that some students have struggled to collaborate and work well with others from different ethnicities, different races, different cultures. At the same time, though they may struggle, they also go to family dinners together because their families have married. And so on Sundays, they have a father who is from a Chinese background and a mother who is from a native Guyanese indigenous background. And then they have cousins who come from African heritages from the Caribbean. So it's interesting. And I wonder for Melissa, you and Sean, have you had discussions in your cohorts around the rich cultural tapestries of our cohorts and how the classrooms made up of students of different cultures and languages and races and ethnicities has impacted the way that they build a culture of learning, a community of learning? Have you all had those conversations, and what do you think about how that plays into the good work we're doing to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging?
Um, yeah, I actually do remember having some conversations with my cohorts about just a lot of them again are in kind of a similar situation as Sean, but it's been neat because they've been able to kind of create an environment where they can share their culture. Like they'll kind of use that as starting point for different discussions in the classroom. And it allows the students to learn more about them, so that they feel more comfortable. It's just a neat little, thing where they're sharing and exchanging information. So some of them will actually turn it into an event, like a type of day where, you know, um, there's, they share things about their cultures. There's food that's brought in. I mean, it's just a huge, thing for some of them, which I think is amazing. And we talk about those types of things, and you know, um, in our VCs, candidates are able to share their backgrounds in relation to that. So it's awesome. I tell people all the time, like I learn so much from my candidates. I know I'm supposed to be teaching them, but I learn a lot about them culturally. And it's amazing. I love it. So yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. And finding opportunities to celebrate those cultures and to bring them together allows us, I don't like to say to create a melting pot because we don't want to melt anything, but like a fruit salad, right? Where we bring in all of the things and there are elements of different cultures all together in one learning environment. Sean, did you want to add anything?
No, I just think it's good. I like having cohorts that come from different places. I've had cohorts with Americans living abroad, but I've also had international students from China or from Japan or Korea, countries where I've lived in before, and how they're talking about their own experiences might be different from what they find in the classroom. And so so sometimes in the VC we talk about how to bridge those experiences and how to look beyond the syllabus and how to think of students as more, as dynamic beings, and how they can grow and change besides learning the academic curriculum. But as we work, to build, especially to build belonging in a classroom. I think that we haven't talked much about belonging, but it's really, I think that when I think about belonging, I think the term used to be buy-in, where it's like, do the students have buy-in in the classroom, or are they just, okay, I'm here in class and I'm going to learn what I'm going to learn, but are they interested in their fellow classmates? Are they interested in the teacher? Is the teacher interested in them as people, or are they interested in just bodies to be filled and, pour the information in their head? So I think that, and I've also found in my cohorts where I've worked with that sense of belonging is really important. Being able to respect the different, not only the educational backgrounds and cultural backgrounds, but also trying to meld those together into learning different approaches to, as we do at Moreland through our modules, we learn different ways of approaching different situations through different case studies and things. And I find it's really, really good to have people from a variety of cultures in those VCs, so they can bring in their own experiences and say how they would handle those situations. And then we kind of come up with a consensus about what would be a balanced approach to situations depending on where they are in the world, or different situations like that.
Right. I'd like to bring in some comments we have in the chat space that will bring in some interesting color to our conversation. First of all, Abigail said that that Abigail teaches in a dual language school, and as a person who is Hispanic, did learn this past year the importance of making students be a part of a family in the classroom, make them feel and bridge what they know from their own culture and feel proud to belong and share with others. That's huge, to know that they belong, but not to strip away who they are, but to bring it in and allow them to introduce aspects of their culture to the classroom, to have a sense of belonging. Rodney says, and I love this, that Rodney has a desire for the design, or a desire to design methods for scholars to understand the importance of navigating their own bias. And I love that Rodney did not say to get rid of their bias, because we cannot get rid of our biases. We can acknowledge them and work through them and be aware of them. And Delmay, it's great to have you shared about Delmay's International Day 2 weeks ago, where 34 nationalities were represented in a school of under 500 students. That is incredible. So we're really grateful to have among us folks with such rich experiences with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Moreland University is dedicated to teachers in all parts of the world. And in particular, we are showing our dedication and commitment to teachers in Africa over the next couple of weeks. Folks, I am so excited to share with you that we will be at the 2023 ASA conference in Nairobi, Kenya, and I will be representing Moreland University, speaking on student agency as a lever for innovation, student engagement, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. So I saw folks in the chat space who are in Kenya or from Kenya. I'm coming and I can't wait to get there. But I also wanted to share with you that we are committed to individual schools like the International School of Uganda, where we serve local Ugandan teaching assistants and have helped, through a partnership with the International School of Uganda, numbers of tens of teaching assistants to grow in their career through professional development, and a number of them to even earn US teaching licenses. And this Thursday, I get on an airplane and I will be flying to Kampala, Uganda, where I'll be spending a few days working with teachers there. Because at Moreland University, we are rooted in an activity-based collaborative model. And we believe that it's important that we create opportunities for teachers to have access to research-based strategies in diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging all over the world. These insights that we're discussing are ingrained throughout our programs, but also we are showing up in spaces. We are going to the conferences in different parts of the world and meeting teachers and engaging with schools to show that we are committed to being present and to understanding and to building relationships across borders as we really live into our mission. So that's another example of a way that Moreland University is committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And if any of you all will be in Kampala, Uganda next week, or Nairobi, Kenya the week after, my email is in the chat space and I would love to see you. We're gonna now come to our final discussion question, because we do have 15 minutes remaining. And this is where we get to bridge theory to practice. In the chat space, I've put the question, and Sean, I'm going to ask you to start, please. What are some immediate evidence-based actions that educators can take now to promote DEIB in the classroom? And how can educators and school leaders measure the impact of these initiatives? That's probably the hardest part. But Sean, would you mind starting us off with that?
Certainly. Well, I think, so I've been reading more about more of the perspective from the teacher, how the teacher approaches the students, and it comes from I can't recall the name anymore, but it's basically from a position of, I like you no matter what you do. non-conditional love, non-conditional positive feelings for all of our students. And as we share that, and as our students, I think as our students know that we care about them individually and not as things to be filled, that their interest towards at least school or interacting in school will increase. And this will also, this could show in tests, this could also show in their personal interactions with their fellow classmates. As far as measuring this across the school, well, any kind of increase in grades is important. I know at my school, that's how everything is measured by test scores, which is not always the best, not the most accurate way to look at academic growth or growth in a student. But I think also, as we can see students being kinder to one another and being, having a willingness to open up to each other and to share, I think that's something. And I think if we as teachers if we can start from a position of caring for the individual students, I think that would be a good place to start. And then I know also at our school, we have a school psychologist who comes around, and once every 2 weeks, there is a lesson on something. It's in Chinese, so I can't understand it, but I know it's something about it's SEL. That's all I know. But what exactly the lessons are, I couldn't tell you. But I've noticed a really good change as the SEL components have been brought into the school. There isn't as many. There's not as much struggling. There's more, and students are able to work more with one another, and they're able to self-regulate a lot better. And I think all of these things can contribute to an overall growth, overall improvement in the school, which can be measured. As you look at school student incidences and things like that. That's what I've come to find from my experience.
Well, I would, in addition to what you've shared, Sean, I would recommend that we think about a couple of things. First of all, and I'll put them in the chat space, inclusive curriculum design. We can incorporate diverse perspectives, authors, and historical events in our curricula, and we can track the incorporation of these different pieces of content through periodic curriculum audits. I alluded to this earlier, but I'm going to add in another one here that is culturally responsive teaching. And I'm, again, putting this in the chat space. We can adapt our teaching methods to meet the diverse needs of all of our students. And sometimes if we use student surveys and assessments that explicitly measure the understanding and respect for cultural diversity, we might be able to determine exactly what our students are thinking, what their perspectives are, and how we can create even more inclusive classrooms. And then I'm going to share one more. And this one is actually sort of a shameless plug for what I'm doing in Africa next week, which is talking about agency. So I believe that when we implement agentic practices, which I will talk about in my workshop, which I'm going to link here for everyone in case you didn't see it, so you can take a look. When we implement agentic practices for our students in the classroom, we enable them to have choice in education. We provide them with options to pursue their own passions and interests, and we create environments where students become leaders in the classroom. And as we're thinking about measurement, we can evaluate student work, their classroom participation, and feedback to measure their levels of agency and inclusiveness. So those are the three areas. And in addition to Sean, I had some other thoughts about social and emotional learning, but you alluded to that. So I think that's what I would share. What do you think, Melissa? What are some strategies that we can sort of add to this conversation so that people leaving our discussion know what are some approaches they can bring into the classroom immediately?
Absolutely. And just thinking about the strategies that I used in my classroom. First thing was to come into the classroom with and just promote respect. You know, I immediately came in and I let my students know I respected them as individuals, you know, and human beings. And, it was just an environment and a culture of mutual respect. Also a lot of flexibility. You know, different students are comfortable with different things. And maybe one of my students preferred to work with headphones on and they wanted to listen to music, something like that. That, just things that I could allow them to do, allowing them choice, allowing them agency in their own learning. Um, that was a way that I could kind of support them as individuals and, kind of model that. And we, of course, I would always cover different topics like, Black History Month. We really went into detail about that, just different cultural things. We did a holidays around the world type thing around Christmas time so that we could learn about different countries that way. So just kind of like really taking like things that are going on around them and just incorporating that into the curriculum, was super helpful. um I always, emphasize that, everybody is different and that's okay. Sometimes I taught at a very homogenous school. And so sometimes students had questions about me. And so, sometimes other students would be like, "Oh, you can't ask that." And I'd be like, "No, that is okay. Because you know what? I do look different from you. And that's okay. We need to embrace that. You can see that. You're allowed to see that. And it's okay." Um, and so kind of modeling that really, really, I think helped. It opened their eyes, because it wasn't something they had dealt with. Um, there's a lot. I could probably share a lot, but those are the main things that I would do.
Well, bringing in that conversation about yourself, I think, is critical. We talked about the word othering, and I want to talk about another word that I mentioned, which is positionality, which is our acknowledgement of who we are and how we enter into the learning environment, what our cultural background might be, what our biases are, and what perspectives we're going to bring in. So I agree with you, Melissa. I have always been open to my students asking about me and my background and who I am and what I believe in as it is appropriate in that space to discuss. And I am an open book to share about who I am with my students, again, as is appropriate and safe in a learning environment. Um, Sean, have you had that experience with your students that they are curious about you, and as you develop relationships with them, they want to know more about you?
Yes, it's as a foreigner living in China, you can always count on 5 specific questions. Where are you from? Do you like Chinese food? How old are you? Are you married? Do you like Chinese people? Do you like China? But
Oh, I got 6.
those are the common questions. And of course, from the very first day, I have them tell me, I have them choose a number between 1 and 5. Okay, you have to tell me 5 things. And then I say, okay, you guys pick a number for me between 1 and 10. So that, sometimes I pick 10. It's okay, you guys can ask me 10 questions. Anything is open. And they're elementary school students. So I know it's not going to go crazy. So it's like, what's your favorite food? Do you like Chinese food? And then I also get to tell them about my Chinese wife and the relationship that I have. And then their eyes get really big. Wow, your wife is Chinese and you eat Chinese food every day. Wow, that's not what we expect. So I'm very open with my students. I think that's just, and then really that's the only way they can get to know me. If I were to go in and say, no, those are highly, from a very individualistic perspective, like, no, I don't want to share anything about myself. That really closes me off to the kids. So no, I'm also like an open book.
Well, with my cohorts, and I have not taught much recently because I'm doing a lot with our professional development and our conferences recently, but with the cohorts that I have taught at Moreland, I was always very intentional about my background. And people always sort of would inquire about me and learn about me because of my background, because of someone who might be in a photo, or maybe there's an instrument back there, I don't know, things that would just tell the story of who I am and offer a window into my background. And I might ask my candidates in the Teach Now program to design a background for one VC that really is representative of who they are, to situate themselves somewhere that shows who they are and in an appropriate way brings their culture and their background and their preferences into this space. So when we're thinking about best practices, I think we need to actively and consistently create opportunities for students to share their voice and to share their perspective and to bring a little piece of their heart into the classroom. Because in that way, they might just feel safe enough to learn from us, right? Well, we have a few moments remaining, and I want to find out some information from our registrants, from our attendees. I'm going to put a question in the chat space, and I would love for everyone who is able to use a chat space to respond. The question is, in your experience and perspective, which aspect of international DEIB practices is most urgently needed to be integrated in your local education systems? And there are 6 options, so let me put them in, all right? And you get to choose whichever one you want. Here's 1 through 3, and here are options 4 through 6. If you're watching this recording, the options in terms of the most urgently needed aspects to be integrated in the local education system where you happen to be are culturally responsive curricula, teacher training, policy reforms, community engagement, technology use and innovation, and inclusive practice. So I want to see if we can get some folks who would, all you have to do is put the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 in the chat space, and we'll see what people come up with. Well, as people are responding, I want to, first of all, thank Sean and Melissa, 2 incredibly insightful instructors who are part of the faculty here at Moreland University, for taking time out of their morning and evening to be with us here. It is such an honor to have time with the both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has really been great. Thanks for this opportunity.
Yes, absolutely.
And to our participants who have attended, if you benefited from this information or the strategies that we have discussed, I implore you to please share the webinar recording that you're going to receive in a day or 2 with your colleagues or your networks via email and social media. Knowledge is power, so share the wealth. For those interested in deepening their understanding about Moreland University, about our Teach Now teacher preparation program, about our master's degrees in education, or about our professional development, if you're a school leader seeking professional development for your school, please feel free to request information by visiting moreland.edu/request-info. On behalf of Moreland University, of the diverse faculty members, of the thousands of community members who are our candidates and alumni from all parts of more than 165 countries around the world. Thank you so much for being with us, for spending this hour talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And may you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.